I want to let you know that this story deals with sensitive and emotional topics. Please watch with care if you find such content difficult. How does a regular Thursday afternoon suddenly turn into a day that will forever haunt an entire community? How does the quiet rhythm of a small-town neighborhood get broken by something so devastating it leaves everyone searching for answers? And maybe the hardest question of all, how does a father, the person who should have been a child's greatest protector, become the source of their deepest loss? Quick thing before we start. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? What's the weather like? And tell me, what case do you want next? Leave it in the comments. I go through every one. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's go. This story isn't easy to share, y'all, and it's definitely not easy to hear. But it matters because it shows just how fragile the line between safety and tragedy really is. Our story takes us to Monroe Township, Ohio, a close-knit community in Clermont County, the kind of place where neighbors wave as they pass, kids ride bikes until the streetlights glow, and life feels predictable. June 15th, 2023 started out like any other warm summer day. Clear skies, sunshine, a picture-perfect moment for families to enjoy time together. But a little after 4 o'clock, peace shattered in a way no one could have imagined. The first sign came through a 911 dispatcher's headset, a call filled with panic, the kind that makes your heart race just hearing it. Moments later, another call came in from a driver on Laurel-Lindale Road. Early news reports were incomplete, but even limited information deeply impacted the community. A young girl was seen urgently seeking help, and witnesses quickly responded, demonstrating care and support during a difficult moment.
Day in Clermont County that started around 4:15 when a woman called 911 saying around the same time Misty Hockey was driving to Kroger and saw a teen girl running for help.
She was running with a little black lab and she was screaming, "Call 911, call 911." She says,
Hockey called 911 as police rushed to the scene on Laurel-Lindale Road.
I wanted to get her in the car, but she just refused to leave her family. And that just says testament of how much she loved them.
Despite everyone saying it's a quiet neighborhood and everyone is very nice,
that 32-year-old Chad Dorman is charged. He's being held without bond at the Clermont County Jail and will be arraigned in just a couple hours here in Clermont County at the municipal court. The sheriff's office says more charges could be added. Laurel-Lindale Road and Clermontville Laurel Road, we learned that an unknown woman called 911. And just 3 minutes later, a separate caller who had driven by called 911 and said that they had seen it. Now, when the sheriff's deputies came to the house, that's when they found Dorman sitting outside on a step. Now, we know that they did try life-saving measures until Monroe Fire and EMS arrived. Now, the boy's mother, a 34-year-old woman, was also outside of the home when officials arrived. Now, you guys have been hearing from a neighbor who was home at the time of the incident, and he spoke with us, and he told us really what type of person Chad Dorman is and what he heard and saw from the scene.
We heard and I didn't know what it was. So I went to the store and come back, and then I, found out really what happened. And unfortunately, I did see the The guy was very unstable.
Deputies rushed to the scene, not knowing what they were about to face. What they did know, there had been a tragic event and lives had been lost. What they couldn't yet process was that the person responsible was the children's own father. When they arrived, they didn't find chaos. They found something eerily calm. Sitting on the front steps was 32-year-old Chad Dorman. He wasn't running, he wasn't hiding. He just sat there, silent, as though nothing had happened. Body cam footage would later capture those surreal moments of his arrest, along with his first unsettling words to law enforcement.
Where's he at?
Here. He's better. On the porch.
Get him right here. You got him on the porch.
We've asked. That's the last place we've been.
We got a visual in the mail.
His name is Chad Dorman. Chad Dorman.
I know, but
We gotta go.
I know, but we can't.
You know,
We gotta find cover first. We ain't no good if we ain't safe ourselves. Hey, no. We need to come from this side where we can see them. Don't take cover behind her. We see them. We're going to approach from this side. We got cover. Right here.
6 number 29 and 63 is check out.
we're not working right now.
Stage and air carrier is going to go ahead and fly whenever any units can advise.
Get your hand out of here.
72.
Cover 21. It's in the air.
If those guys can confirm that there's people that need first aid and that's he's not complying, they need to take care of the
I got it.
victims. If they have to shoot him, then shoot him.
Man, I ain't trying to hurt nobody. I'm completely sober. Never did drugs a day
63,
in my
we're
life.
21.
I'm not trying to fight you. Gallon.
We on primary?
Now.
29, we got 3 kids down.
3 kids down, 16 feet up.
Gallon.
63, we're 21.
Knock
Have
it off.
EMS respond over here.
You're clear, they're being advised.
Robert 34, just started mass casualty response.
63, do you want them to respond to the Laurel Lindale address?
What are you doing, man?
Hey, are you copying all this?
Here. You the only one else inside the house?
What?
You the only one else inside the house?
Yeah.
Sit down right here.
My daughter, she ran over to the fire department. This is Will.
They're all being advised to come. They've requested 2 additional medics. There's also air carriers flying, but they need an LV. The medic coming. Yes.
Can you get the wallet out of my back pocket? Yeah, the road remains solid. Yes, sir.
Make a call, I'm on the launch right now. I'm almost there. Yeah, 90 is where Jeep and Captain's Way.
With Dorman in custody, the devastating truth began to unfold. 3 young lives were lost, and their mother was hurt while trying to protect them. In only a few moments, a home was forever changed, and the tragedy deeply affected everyone involved. And as the investigation began, only one question echoed through Monroe Township. Not who, because the answer sat in handcuffs, but why? Why would a father make a choice that destroyed everything? It's a question that, to this day, has no clear answer. Before the silence, there was joy. Picture bare feet running across the grass, the crack of a baseball connecting just right, and the kind of laughter only kids can bring, the kind that fills a neighborhood with life. That's who the Dorman boys were before everything turned upside down. Clayton, Hunter, and Chase weren't just names in a headline. They were three brothers, a team of energy, imagination, and love. Clayton, 7 years old, was the leader of the pack. Fresh out of first grade, he loved baseball, fishing, and protecting his little brothers. Friends and neighbors remembered him as kind and thoughtful, the kind of kid who made sure everyone was included. Hunter, 4 years old, was fearless. Mischievous grin, boundless curiosity, and a knack for turning a simple backyard into a grand adventure. If Clayton was the planner, Hunter was the spark, always ready to follow along and make things even wilder. And little Chase, just 3 years old, was the baby of the family. He followed his brothers everywhere, eager to keep up, his giggles and playful spirit leaving smiles in his wake. For his family, he was the cuddly sidekick, still discovering the world with wonder. Neighbors saw the Dormans as a typical all-American family. Social media posts painted that exact picture, Clayton and Hunter proudly showing off fish they'd caught, Chase grinning ear to ear. There were photos from dirt track races, simple days out with their dad. From the outside, it looked like a family making memories, building a childhood full of joy. And that's why the tragedy hit so hard. The same man who had once cheered them on and taught them to cast a line became the one responsible for their loss. These weren't just three young lives gone too soon. They were futures filled with promise. Clayton was just years away from middle school, Hunter was about to start kindergarten, and Chase was just finding his words and his voice. Their days should have been filled with scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the kind of safety every child deserves. For the family, the community, and anyone who has heard their story, the heartbreak isn't only in the loss, it's in the broken trust. Home is supposed to be the safest place. Family is supposed to mean protection. And when that trust is shattered, the wound reaches far beyond one household. It lingers, reminding everyone of how fragile and precious those ordinary moments really are. In the aftermath, investigators tried to piece together how something so devastating could happen. What they uncovered painted a picture that was deeply unsettling. This wasn't a random outburst, it was something that had been building quietly for months. Neighbors remembered ordinary days, kids playing in the yard, family dinners, smiles and photos. But behind closed doors, a darker reality was unfolding. Investigators later concluded that this was not an impulsive act, but something that had been developing over a period of time. On the morning of June 15th, Chad Dorman behaved unusually and made comments that, in hindsight, were concerning. As the day continued, his actions seemed more and more out of the ordinary, leading up to the tragic events. Experts later debated whether his actions were the result of emotional distress or something planned, and this question was central to the legal case. Later in court, the defense would argue mental illness. They would point to these behaviors, the pacing, the Bible, the repeated phrase, as signs of a man spiraling into psychosis. But prosecutors countered with something hard to ignore. He had no documented history of severe mental illness, no psychiatric hospitalizations, no diagnoses, no pattern that pointed to a break from reality. What they saw was planning, not madness. The question that hung over everyone was heavy. Were those final hours the unraveling of a mind or the cold calculations of someone determined to follow through? Either way, by that afternoon, the line between ordinary life and tragedy had been crossed. And for the family, for the community, and eventually for the courtroom, the haunting refrain remained, "Chad knows what's right." But no one could understand what he thought that meant. After the crisis, Monroe Township moved from shock toward community support. Neighbors reached out to help each other, and schools worked with counselors to help children and families. Investigators began their work according to protocol and focused on supporting both the survivors and the community. Public updates given by officials remained factual and focused on protecting the privacy of those affected. Community organizations and schools worked together to support members of the town, and leaders made sure the story was shared with respect for the family. The focus was on helping people heal and honoring the memory of those lost. If there was a single message that carried through those first days, it was this: grief can be private, but support is shared. The community chose to honor the children by how it showed up for the survivors quietly, consistently, and without feeding the rumor mill. In a moment when attention could have spiraled toward the worst details, Monroe Township kept its focus where it belonged: on healing, on accountability through the courts, and on preserving the memory of 3 young lives with dignity. Once Chad Dorman was taken into custody, the chaos at the scene gave way to the long process of the justice system. He was charged, booked, and brought before a judge. For neighbors, reporters, and even seasoned law enforcement, the single question kept echoing: why? But for prosecutors, the goal was clear: make sure he never walked free again. At his first court appearance, Clermont County's chief prosecutor, David Gast, spoke directly about the case. His words carried the weight of the entire community, outlining the tragedy in a way that silenced the courtroom.
And the facts I have for you at this point are as follows. There's been a full admission in this case, Judge. The case is still new. We're still discovering facts. We know that one of the boys was able to flee into a field near the home. And again, we know from his admission, the mother was in her attempt to protect her children. Judge, I asked the court setting this bond to just begin to imagine their fear. This was the man that every day they woke up looking to for protection, love, guidance in all things. Man they trust more than any other person on earth. The person they rely upon to keep them safe from harm. Judge, it's important for the court to know in the bond we're going to request today, for the court to understand Clermont County deputies, Monroe Township Fire and EMS, and other first responders bravely respond to the scene where they don't know what's going on. They did not know what they're facing, and they come into a scene that no one can ever be prepared to guess. Obviously he did. The weight of the evidence against the defendant at this point, Judge, we stand here with a full admission of the defendant. That also goes to the confirmation of the defendant's identity, and witnesses on scene did see at least part of what happened. Next, the court is to consider the likelihood this person would return the court if a bond were issued.
The revelation that stunned everyone was Chad's confession. He admitted openly that he had planned the entire act. It wasn't just a short statement of guilt, it was a full account, explaining how he had mapped out the day. On the surface, that sounded like a case that would be decided quickly, with justice delivered without delay. But the legal system is rarely simple. For months, hearings and motions kept the case moving slowly, mostly outside the public's view. Then, in March of 2024, everything shifted. A judge ruled that the confession could not be used at trial. The reason? A violation of his Miranda rights. During questioning, Chad had asked for a lawyer. Detectives continued speaking with him, and everything he said after that moment became legally inadmissible. What once looked like the strongest evidence, the confession everyone believed would guarantee conviction, was thrown out. For the family and the community, it felt like another blow. They already knew what had happened, they already knew who was responsible. But suddenly, the words that confirmed it all were no longer allowed in court. Without the confession, prosecutors had to depend on other evidence: eyewitness testimony, physical proof from the scene, and the accounts of Laura and Alexis. It was still a strong case, but the path to justice became less certain, more complicated, and far heavier for the survivors to endure. The reality set in: justice would not come easily, and for a community already shaken to its core, that uncertainty was almost as painful as the crime itself. With the confession thrown out, the case took a dramatic turn. What once seemed like a straightforward path to conviction suddenly became a legal battle with no guarantees. That's when Chad Dorman's defense team introduced a new strategy, a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The insanity defense has always been one of the most debated and misunderstood arguments in the courtroom. It doesn't mean someone simply walks free. Under Ohio law, the defense must prove that at the time of the crime, the defendant suffered from such a severe mental disease or defect that he didn't understand right from wrong. It's a very high bar to meet. His attorneys pointed to the days leading up to the tragedy, the pacing with a Bible in his hands, the phrase he kept repeating, "Chad knows what's right." They described those actions as signs of a man disconnected from reality, spiraling into psychosis. But prosecutors pushed back hard. They emphasized that Chad had no record of severe mental illness, no psychiatric hospital stays, no long-term treatment, no history that pointed to a break from reality. And they argued that his actions showed planning, not confusion. He left work early, made a cryptic comment over lunch, opened a specific gun safe, and targeted his own family. Each step, they said, was deliberate. Experts were brought in on both sides, psychologists and psychiatrists, debating whether those strange behaviors were signs of mental illness or calculated preparation. For the community, the idea of an insanity plea was painful. It suggested the possibility, however small, that accountability could be blurred. Families who had already lost so much were forced to listen to arguments about whether this was madness or malice. And one haunting question lingered in every courtroom discussion was, Chad knows what's right, the rambling of a man lost in his own mind, or the chilling mantra of someone justifying the unthinkable. The answer would shape not only the trial, but the way the entire tragedy would be remembered. Chapter 7, what the court could and couldn't establish. The stage was set for a trial that promised to be long, painful, and intensely public. On one side, the defense was prepared to argue that Chad Dorman's state of mind would be central to the case. On the other, prosecutors stood firm, ready to prove that this was a deliberate, tragic event. For Laura and Alexis, the survivors, that meant facing their worst day again on the witness stand, with the whole country watching. But just when it seemed the trial was about to begin, everything shifted. In August of 2024, the case took an unexpected turn. Instead of proceeding to trial, Chad Dorman entered a guilty plea to 3 counts of aggravated crimes and 2 counts of felonious actions. Why the sudden change? The answer lay in the weight of the possible punishment. Prosecutors had been pursuing the death penalty, and while that is the ultimate sentence, it also comes with years, sometimes decades, of appeals, hearings, and legal battles. Each step would have forced Laura and Alexis to relive the trauma again and again. Prosecutors made a decision. They agreed to remove the death penalty from consideration in exchange for a guilty plea. Their reason was clear: protecting the surviving family from years of re-traumatization. They wanted justice delivered without the burden of endless legal delays. So instead of a long trial, the case concluded swiftly. In a courtroom that had been bracing for months of painful testimony, there was silence as Chad admitted his guilt. But one thing remained unresolved: the question of motive. Prosecutors themselves acknowledged it. There was no clear explanation for why this happened. No statement, no evidence, no reasoning that could make sense of the loss. And that's perhaps the most difficult part of this case. Some tragedies cannot be explained, only endured. For the community of Monroe Township, that silence became its own kind of echo. The realization that no court, no transcript, and no sentence can ever fully answer the question of why. The trial never happened, but there was still a reckoning. On sentencing day, Chad Dorman stood before the court one last time. The judge delivered the outcome with finality. 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus an additional 16 years for the pain he caused his wife and stepdaughter. In plain terms, he will never walk free again. But the words that left the deepest impact weren't the judges. They came from the survivors. Laura, his ex-wife, and Alexis, his stepdaughter, faced him in court and delivered their victim impact statements. It took unimaginable strength to speak, yet they did so with courage and love. They described what was lost, not just lives, but futures. Bedrooms now empty, toys that would never be touched again, laughter that had been silenced. They spoke not only of the terror of that day, but also of the joy their boys had brought into the world. Laura asked for something powerful, that her sons, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase B, remembered not for the tragedy, but for the lives they lived. She wanted people to think of fishing trips, go-karts, and summer afternoons by the water. She wanted them remembered as children full of life, not as victims. In that moment, even through unimaginable pain, she was still protecting them. The community carried that message forward. Vigils were held, prayers were offered, and neighbors came together to honor the boys. Their memory became a reminder of how fragile life is and how deeply love endures, even in the face of loss. For Monroe Township, the case officially closed with the sentencing, but the story didn't fade. It lingers, a scar on the heart of the community and a question with no answer. Why? Why would a father destroy what he was meant to protect? There is no truth that can fill that void, no explanation that can make sense of it. What remains is the silence left behind, an echo of 3 young lives gone too soon, a family forever changed, and a community forced to carry the weight of an unanswerable question. And maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that some things will never make sense, and all we can do is remember, reflect, and hold on to the love that was left behind.